Today we're going to use a delicious yet economical cut of beef together with a bottle of beer and some store cupboard basics to put together a pie so good you'll wish you made two. Properly perfect pie, parsimoniously produced. Let's get into it. Our first job today is pastry, and there's nothing fancy here. We're just doing short crust 101. Half fat to flour with a little water to bring it together. Now I like my pastry pretty thin and crispy, so for the dish I'm cooking today, I'll only need 300 grams or about 10 ounces of plain all-purpose flour. I'll just weigh that out into a large bowl and then set that aside and get the fat ready. I'm doing all butter today, so I'll weigh out about 150 grams or thereabouts of cold unsalted butter and then cut it into smallish dice. For the best pastry possible, it's important that this butter be cold, straight from the fridge, and you want to handle it as little as you can and work quickly to stop it getting too warm. I like to run my hands under the cold tap for a minute or so to make sure they're cold, and then I'll just add that butter into my flour. Next, I'll add a good grip of sea salt crystals. This adds both seasoning and roughness that will be useful in the next step. I'll go in with my cold hands and just roughly rub the flour into the butter, working quickly and pretty forcefully to combine the flour and butter without it warming up. The move to get started is just to keep grabbing handfuls of the flour and butter and squeezing it together to break up those bigger chunks. Then I'll switch to using my fingertips and just keep rubbing together the flour and butter until it resembles rough breadcrumbs. Now we don't need to completely combine here. The point is to work things as little as possible until just combined, otherwise we'll end up with tough pastry and nobody wants that. The aim is to have most of the flour combined, but still with some smallish chunks of butter left. This took me about 3 minutes in total, aim for about the same. Next, I'll run my hands under that cold tap again to cool them down, and then I'll make a well in the middle of the flour and add in a little cold water. Again, as cold as you can here. Hot water pastry is a totally different thing. We'll look at that another day. So using my hands, I'll just work that water into the mixture, being sure to twist and squeeze and let the flour get hydrated. The aim is to use as little water as possible to make a cohesive dough that leaves the bowl mostly clean but isn't sticky at all. So I'll just keep adding the water a little at a time, making sure to fully mix between each addition until the dough just comes together. Once done, it should still be a little crumbly. It should just feel like it's holding together, and this looks perfect. I don't want to work this any more than I really have to, so I'll just pull it out onto my board and then form it into a ball, which I'll wrap tightly in plastic wrap and pop in the fridge to chill while we get on with the pie filling. So for that, I've got 750 grams or about 1.5 pounds of great quality diced beef skirt. You might find this in the supermarkets, especially if they have a fresh counter, but for best results, visit your local butcher if you have one. You'll get better quality, fresher, and it'll most likely be cheaper as well. Skirt is perfect for pies. It's fairly lean with little gristle or connective tissue, but it's kind of tough, so it does need a bit of cooking. Obviously, if you can't get hold of it, other similar cuts are available that will be almost as good. But first, let's get our veg prep sorted, and today that just means an onion. There's nothing much to see here. I'll just chop off the top as usual, halve it, and then chop it roughly into a largeish dice. I want the onions to lend some noticeable texture in the finished pie. Back to the meat, and to get this ready, I'll take a large Ziploc, important, freezer bag, and add a tablespoon of plain or all-purpose flour. To that, I'll add a few generous twists of black pepper and a good grip of salt. Just the cooking salt is fine here. I'll then give that a quick shake to combine and then add in all of the meat. There's no need to pat dry beforehand for this, the juice will help the flour bind. Next, I'll seal up the bag and I'll just throw it around to get all of that meat evenly coated in that seasoned flour. Don't be shy, throw it around like you mean it. Once you've had your fun, and hopefully not throwing flour all over the kitchen, the meat should be fully and evenly coated in that flour with hardly any left loose in the bag. Now a pie isn't a pie without awesome flavour, and that starts with getting a good browning on the meat. So for that, I'll get a large wide pan over a high heat and add a good squeeze of high smoke point oil. This is sunflower, you do you. Then I'll get a good sear on the meat, working in batches to avoid crowding the pan. Once that's done, I'll lower the heat to medium and throw in that onion, then give it a good stir to coat everything, using my spatula to pick up any bits of fond from the bottom of the pan. The onions will start to release some water here, which will help with the deglazing. We don't want to miss any of that flavour, but any that we do miss will get picked up later. Now I'll just drop the heat down to low and let the onion cook for about 5 minutes until softened and translucent. Then to that I'll add the meat, taking care to get any juices that have come out onto the plate, and I'll give everything a stir to combine. I'll let that cook over low heat for another minute or two until the meat is warmed back through, and then I'll go in with a good amount of Worcester, or Worcestershire if you must, sauce. Don't be shy, give it a good 10 or 15 glugs, probably getting on for a tablespoon in total. Stir that in, then give it a minute, and then it's time for our ale. I'm using this Guinness West Indies Porter today. Feel free to sub in whatever ale you prefer, but I do recommend a darker ale for this. Porters are great, stouts can work, but I find they have a bit too much body in the finished dish. Whatever you do, stay away from anything pale. The hop forward flavour you get in most pale ales really doesn't suit this dish, IMHO. Nobody wants a floral flavour in their pie. In case you're wondering, I got the Guinness from Morrison's. It's £2.25 a bottle, but it is on offer at 4 for the price of 3, which makes it £1.69 for 500ml. We only need half the bottle, so feel free to dispose of the other half however you see fit. Once half of that is in, I'll follow it with 250ml or half of this can of beef stock. Now this stock isn't cheap by any stretch, but it's definitely worth it. But feel free to sub in whatever good quality stock you like, or use homemade if you have it. Then just give everything a good stir, turn up the heat to bring it to a boil, and then cover it with a tight fitting lid before lowering the heat to low and letting it sit and simmer for an hour, stirring every once in a while. 1 hour later, I feel like having mushrooms in my pie today, and I happen to have these chestnut mushrooms hanging around, so I'll just use those. To prep them, I'll just brush off any obvious dirt, never wash a mushroom, and then remove the stalks, which are looking a bit past their best, before roughly chopping them. And then it's time for my secret weapon, a couple of rashers of smoked bacon. This is back, but streaky, or in America just bacon, will work fine too. You can totally skip this if you want and you'll still have an awesome pie, but this really does bring a great extra layer of flavour, so if you happen to have it lying around, I recommend using it. I'll just roughly chop that up, and then I'll get a wide pan over a high heat and add a little neutral high smoke point oil. Again, I'm using sunflower, and I'll throw in those mushrooms. I'll quickly toss them to coat and then follow them with the bacon, then a little extra oil if things are looking too dry. And then I'll just let these cook, tossing occasionally for about 5 minutes until the mushrooms have some colour and the bacon is starting to turn crispy. Once done, I'll just stir those into that pie filling, and then I'll place the whole thing over a low heat on my smallest burner and let it simmer uncovered for another 15 to 20 minutes until reduced and thickened to a gravy consistency. Once that's done, I'll check the meat. It should be tender by this point, but still with some bite. For pie, you don't want it to be falling apart. You still want it to have some chew to it. This is perfect. I'll check that gravy for seasoning. This is great in terms of salt and pepper, but depending on the ale, you might find it needs brightening up a bit. There is quite a bit of fat in here and a lot of savoury flavour, which is definitely a good thing, but like all good things, you can have too much. I like to add a dash of balsamic vinegar at this point to bring some acid and a little bit of sweetness. Be careful with this, you don't need much. It's always easier to add than it is to take away. So taste, adjust, and taste again until you're happy. A good stir, taste again, perfect. I'm calling that done. I'll set this aside to completely cool while I get the pie dish ready. For that, I'll grab my pastry from the fridge, and then I'll separate roughly a third of it off and save that for the lid. Now for the base, I'll just roll this out, trying my best to keep it roughly in the shape I want it to end up in, but not worrying too much about it. A short crust like this will crack and roll oddly. Just work with it as best you can. You don't need to use a lot of force on your pin here, just keep rolling and turning, adding more flour to your board as you need to until you have a nice thin sheet of pastry that's big enough to comfortably cover the bottom and sides of your chosen pie tin. Once that's done, just lightly grease the tin with butter or your saturated fat of choice before rolling up the pastry sheet onto your pin for easy handling, and then gently cajole it into the dish, carefully making sure you ease it into all of those corners and edges. If, like me, you have any mishaps during this process, don't worry. Just grab a bit of the excess pastry from the top and use it to plug any holes. No one will be any the wiser. Once that's done, in goes the filling, now completely cooled, and just smooth it out until it's evenly distributed. We just need to rinse and repeat this process for the lid. This can be slightly thicker than the base if you like, but I still do like to keep it pretty thin. Just roll this out on a floured board as before, turning to keep it even until it reaches your desired thickness and it's slightly bigger than the tin. Don't forget to account for it dipping slightly if your filling doesn't come right to the top of the tin, like I did in the chicken pie video the other week. Once that's done, I'll brush a little milk. I still haven't bought a new pastry brush, so you have to use your imagination a bit. Onto the lip of the base, and then using my rolling pin as before, I'll lift the lid into place on top of the pie. Then I'll just go around the edge with my fingers to ensure I've got a good seal before going around with the tines of a fork to really seal it and make it look nice and rustic. Finally, I'll use a sharp knife to go around the edge, removing any excess using a downward cutting motion to give a good clean edge. And then I'll use a bit more milk, or you could beat an egg with a little water here for an egg wash if you prefer, but I like the milk, to just give a good glaze to the top of the pie. If you want to decorate your pie, go ahead and re-roll those offcuts and shape them as you like. I decided to go with a thumbs up today, just in case you haven't clicked like on this video already, and because subscribe was too big to fit on the pie. But seriously, please do hit that thumbs up button if you're finding the video useful, and a subscribe would be super helpful to the channel right now too. Thanks. Whatever you decide to decorate with, don't forget to brush that with milk or egg wash as well. Make a few small slits to let the steam escape. I know you'd noticed that hole and I deliberately didn't mention it. It turns out it was a feature all along, honestly. All that's left is to cook this thing, so I'll preheat my oven to 220C 430F convection, and then I'll pop the pie in on the middle shelf. I'll set a timer for 10 minutes, after which I'll turn the oven down to 180C 350F, and I'll let it cook for another 30 minutes until beautifully browned and the filling is starting to bubble through those holes a little bit. To serve, I'll just gently run my knife around the edge to ensure nothing's stuck, and then I'll carefully remove the whole pie to a plate. From there, it's easy to cut this up into portions, making sure you get plenty of that filling and delicious gravy, and serve it with your favourite veggies. I've got steamed tender stem broccoli today, but feel free to go with whatever you like. Mash would be traditional here in the UK, or go full on northern and check out this video next for some perfect potatoes to serve with your pie.